that the modern society couldn't do? How could they see things that the greatest telescopes couldn't see? How could they do this? What was on their mind? See, we don't think like Africans think. Because I cannot speak for you, but many of us are wondering or planning on making money to pay the rent, to buy food. The Dogon did not have that worry because they knew what was going to go down. So they could spend their time raising their consciousness as opposed to us spending part of our day stressed out because we're worried about how we're going to live from day to day. And this is what this system does. It keeps you worried so you can't grow. But the Dogon had higher order thinking skills where they were able to take information that was large and collapse it. It's like, I can use London, money, pounds. I use American money. We have 100 pennies. You know 100 pennies? You have something like that here too, right? However, if you carried 100 pennies around in your pocket, it would get pretty heavy. So what do? You take 100 pennies and you collapse it into one coin. Am I right? It's called a pound. Is that correct? In America, we take 100 pennies and collapse it into $1. We could take 5 pennies and make a nickel, which is 5 cents. 5 pennies. That 5 cents is in that nickel. Even though this is only one thing, it represents 5 things. We then could take 10 pennies or 2 nickels, and we have what we call a dime, which is 10 cents. We're walking together here? Well, that's like information. That's the way the Dogon thought. They kept collapsing information into pieces so that they didn't have to carry around 500 pennies, which they could carry a $5 bill. You take upwards of 20,000 pennies, you can take 50,000 pennies, and you can carry around a piece of paper that represents all those heavy pennies that you carry. You collapse it. That's what the Dogon mind did. That's what the Kemetic mind did. It was constantly collapsing things in the mind in order to do it. But how did they do it? Because now you have to look at how did they develop this way of thinking. Because before we talk about the Dogon, you have to understand the brilliance of their mind. As simple as it was complex. Simple, but complex. They made everything that was complex simple. Complex is 100 pennies. Simple is carrying $1. They made complex simple. We then would go into the 4 levels of Dogon philosophy. We're going to talk about that. The Dogon creation story. How did the Dogon see the world created? African constellations. What did the Dogon know about astronomy? And if they knew this, how did they know this? No Europeans came to tell them this. When you look at where the Dogon live, you know. Most Africans don't want to go there. The Dogon live in rough territory. Dry, arid, hot, cliffs. It's not the most attractive place to live, but it had everything they needed to take them to where they had to go, which was a brilliant, very brilliant people. Dogon Astronomy Part 2, we deal with what the Dogon actually knew. What did they actually know? We hit about 15 points. This is the first lesson in terms of higher order thinking skills. If I had time, we could really get deep into this, but we'll go as deep as we possibly can for the time that we have. You'll understand it. But if I had more time, if this whole thing could be dedicated to one class, I could expand this out. In light of that, I'm going to make the complex simple. So I'm going to attempt to demonstrate to you what I mean by making the complex simple. This literally is going to be 12 hours that I'm going to condense into an hour and a half. And you're going to walk away with the information that you would walk away if we had all the time. That's my challenge this evening. The 4 levels of Dogon philosophical consciousness. What did they think? How did they think? How did they develop their thought patterns? What did their schools look like? How did they teach their children? And how can we teach our children reflective of how they taught theirs? And when we were here in London with our grandmothers and grandfathers, and down south in Mississippi, and when we were in Amsterdam with our families, did in fact our ancestors, our grandmothers, actually replicate this teaching pattern, and we just didn't know it? Because I believe that we are still being taught this way, but only by those that have not been contaminated by the material world. Geography and history of the Dogon. It's important to understand. When you place somebody in time and space, you can take them anywhere you want to go. I'll give you an example. I first went to Kemet with Dr. Ben in 1983. 2 weeks before we went to Kemet, Dr. Ben, we met in a place where he gave us like an introduction of what we were going to experience 2 weeks before. This was in July. And he looked at us and he said, there's something I want to tell you. I don't want you to blame me for the person that's going to come back from Kemet. Because the person that's sitting in this place today is not going to be the person that comes back from Kemet. He could not have been more correct, because I'm still trying to figure out who was in that place when I was sitting in that seat. A visit to Kemet will transform you into a whole nother way of thinking. When you see what our ancestors actually did in Kemet, you can't come back the same person. So when I think about these concepts and what Dr. Ben did in terms of that, he revolutionized our look, and their look even. The Nubians in Kemet look differently at themselves today because of Dr. Ben, and for all the hundreds of African people who have gone there from London, from Amsterdam, and from all parts of the world, have now returned back. When I went to Kemet in 1987, when there was the ASCAC conference, I was sitting on a boat with a young brother who went to the Nubian Cultural School, and his master teacher was there. And the master teacher told me that he met 2 weeks before then, which would have been in 1987. It was the first time in his life he met an African-American heart surgeon. He didn't know African-Americans were heart surgeons. When we started going there as doctors and lawyers, we showed our people in southern Egypt that it's possible. Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark were giving a presentation at the at the Old Cataract in Aswan. There was a brother named Muhammad who rode one of the boats, the Felucca. He would take people on rides. And he heard Dr. Ben was going to give a lecture. And he said to me, you know, you came with, I said, yeah, I came with Dr. He said, can I meet Dr. Ben? I said, sure. And I told him when to meet me, and we were walking towards Dr. Ben's presentation at the Old Cataract Hotel. And when we got to where the cars come and the thing comes up and down to let the cars through, I was walking, and I turned around, and Muhammad was behind me. And I said, come on. And he said, I can't. I said, why can't you come? He said, because I'm not allowed. I said, well, why not? He said, Nubians aren't allowed in the hotel. I said, what? You know, see, because for those of you who remember America, you remember Mississippi? I'm thinking Mississippi, sitting in the back of the bus. Can't go into the... I said, oh, no, we're not going to do this. I'm paying my money. You're my guest. You're coming with me. Long story short, Muhammad came with me, and he met Dr. Ben. I say this story because this example is only one of many stories of Africans who are returning with the consciousness that we have to Nubia, letting our brothers and sisters know you don't have to sit on the back of the bus no more. You not only can go into the hotel, you can own the hotel. There are places around the world where our people who are looking at those of us who are conscious, and you know it's a lonely world when you're conscious, you know. An African is a lonely world, you know that. But when you bring that consciousness into a room of other African people who are on the verge of getting it on, like that's what George Clinton said, on the verge of getting it on,